Hello, everybody. I am here today with Dr. Bruce Ecker, and I am very excited because I am a long-term admirer of his work and really inspired by it. Many of you have heard me quote him over and over again. He is the author of Unlocking the Emotional Brain, and the co-developer of Coherence Therapy. And I can't remember when did your first, I believe it was a book, a chapter book on on I read an article or a book chapter of yours before Unlocking the Emotional Brain.
Well, we have chapters in several different books.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's probably been 10 years at least since I first read your
Mm.
work. And 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 I recognized a kindred spirit in that I really believe that the issue in trauma, and really we don't have to just exclude it to trauma, is the implicit memories that are left. And that's why I quote you all the time.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and that's an area where your framework and our framework very strongly have in common.
Yeah,
Absolutely. In fact, in coherence therapy, one of our sort of hallmark conceptualizations is that there's a crucial distinction between what was suffered and what was learned from what was suffered.
right,
We love to put it that way. And what was learned from what was suffered is in implicit memory.
right.
But as I'm sure you know very well, you could spend a whole session doing great work guiding a client to bring attention to and recover or re-experience, revisit what was suffered, do a great job of that without ever learning what was learned from what was suffered.
Right.
Right? And that's the
And how that
implicit
learning,
schema, the mental model, right?
what is that quote from you? Implicit memories makes the worst experience in our lives persist as felt realities.
Yes.
That is one of my favorite Bruce Ecker quotes.
Mm. Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. And when we're busy focusing on what happened instead of what was learned or what carries forward and still affects every moment of every day, extending into the future.
Yes.
That feels to me like the cruel and unusual
Mm.
legacy of trauma.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, I think, something that's so important right there for therapists to understand. And we emphasize this is that it is now rigorous neuroscientific knowledge that these emotional learnings are not supposed to fade out. They're
Right.
supposed to last timelessly.
Yes.
You know, that's adaptive in the emotional learning and memory system for in evolution. And the common phrasing in the therapy field of pathogenic beliefs, maladaptive beliefs, as if the emotional learning and memory system is malfunctioning by still holding tightly to these original emotional learnings. No, it's
Right.
not malfunctioning. It's functioning properly.
Yeah.
Therapists need to know the brain's special process for unlearning them,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. Absolutely. I always say to my clients, the cavemen and women with PTSD lived long enough to become our ancestors.
Oh, I love that. Wow.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Because it behooves us. And also, I don't know if you feel this way, but the event focus that has historically been the sort of legacy of Freud, um, kind of leads us to forget that events happen in unsafe environments. So the implicit memories and the implicit sort of map of the world comes out of an environment that is dangerous 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It doesn't just come out of, last Tuesday when your dad beat you up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like you're talking about complex trauma now, where a child lives in a continuous environment of harm and suffering and endangerment of various types regularly. Yeah.
Right. But also, even if, if we're thinking about simple, a physically abusive family,
Mm.
a physically abusive family is an environment.
Yes.
Just because nothing happens on Tuesday doesn't mean the child feels safe.
Not at all. Not at all. Well, I remember from Psych 101 that once you learn a danger, intermittent reinforcement is the most tenacious conditioning, right? Once you learn that it might happen at any time, right? Then you're in anxiety and unsafety all the time,
Right. Right.
just like you said.
Right. And then your implicit model of the world is it's unsafe all the time, everywhere.
Yes. Yes, you're learning that the world, because, a little child takes the family world as a representative sample of the world and takes the
Absolutely.
parents as representative samples of human beings. So this generalization happens that carries forward into adult life.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as as you say, um, because it's implicit, people are not aware that they're operating from these maps. And and you know, helping them to be aware of these patterns. I always say a pattern is memory, right? Something
Mhm.
that
Yes.
repeats is memory,
Yeah.
whether it has words or not.
Right, right. So I think you're talking about the learning of patterns in the world, people or situations, or even
Mhm.
patterns in oneself. Semantic memory. The researchers call the learning of patterns semantic memory, as distinct from event memory that you were talking about, episodic memory. Yeah.
And don't you think a certain kinds of patterns reflect implicit memory?
Did you
So
say that again?
right,
Certain kinds
right.
of patterns.
Certain kinds of patterns, like I was just doing some supervision with a colleague um, um, around a client who shuts down every time um, every time something is stimulated emotionally or somatically inside her, she
Mm.
shuts down.
Oh.
So session after session, twice a week,
Mm.
he's sitting with someone who can't talk, can't respond, um, and and that obviously is implicit learning.
Yes. Yeah, I agree completely. And where where we in coherence therapy, it's a core principle to make it show up, to elicit the implicit learning experientially, not try to theorize it or interpret it or figure it out, because none of us are brilliant enough to get it right. Each person has a unique emotional learning history, so we make it show up experientially. The client feels it, gives words to it. We learn it from the client now, but we do get inklings, right? I love a phrase I once heard a therapist use, following the client a little bit ahead, right? You
Yeah.
get these hypotheses of what seems to maybe going to be there. And so that shapes, in coherence therapy, we can shape a discovery process to see if what we think looks like it's there is really there. And what you just described to me leads me to want to look for an implicit learning, which in words would wind up being something like having my own experience is intolerably dangerous. Because if what I'm experiencing inside shows up visibly, I get whatever rage, shaming, beaten,
Right.
cut off and put in my room for 6 hours, whatever.
Right.
There's an emotional learning that having the inner experience, whatever it is, feelings, knowings, it
Yeah.
leads to terrible suffering. And so that's the learning of the suffering. And then there's the learning of the tactic needed to avoid that suffering, which is blocking everything inside.
Right.
That's what
Right.
I get. That's what I start to inkle from
Me,
from the example you
me
just
too.
mentioned. Yeah.
And then I go a little further to think, okay, in this environment, you don't get punished for not talking, you get punished for talking. So it's safe to shut down or safer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it avoids the suffering that comes from talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's fascinating.
Reminds me of a male, adult man client I once had. It's a case that I've published. Severe uh, social anxiety, which he experienced as a basically a kind of mutism when among other people. He would just lock up, freeze up, could barely
Mhm.
get himself to speak. And sure enough, what we found was exactly the kind of thing we just described. A father who would rage and shame and searingly come at him for the slightest thing that father deemed wrong, a mistake, a misstep of any kind, spoken, action. And so he expected that every human being is ready to do that to him at
Right.
any time. So just being among people was extremely unsafe
Right.
for him. Yeah.
And I, and I think this, this is where your emphasis on the implicit is so important because that's not the kind of learning that can be addressed cognitively
So true.
in ourselves.
Yeah. It's subcortical learning.
Right.
And so the conscious thinking brain just does not have access to it. And I think most therapists with any experience know that cognitive insight doesn't really make a dent in these
Right.
patterns.
Right.
Yeah.
We might wish, but
Yeah,
right.
if only. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I use this explicit memory focus um, in my trauma-informed parts model, um, so that we're helping clients to notice um, the suffering as the suffering of parts, because it allows them to have a little bit more mindful relationship rather than drowning in the feelings. And which it is very easy to drown in the implicit, as I don't have to tell you. It's it's just like, you know, it sucks us down the rabbit hole.
Hmm. Well, it certainly can. Yeah, therapists have to. Another little sort of guiding motto we have in coherence therapy is that we have to do the work in small enough steps,
Yes.
small enough steps to be tolerable at every step of the work. And again, I'm remembering that man that I just mentioned, because it was very severe, his traumatic memory of what he suffered under his father. And I remember being really in my, okay, is this a small enough step? I said to him, okay, you had dinner with some coworkers recently and you're locked up, you froze up. And he was clueless about this. Talk about implicit. He was absolutely mystified by what was causing this, other than, something's wrong with me, right? I'm
Right.
broken, all bad, sick, stupid, or crazy, or something like that, the
Right.
usual pathologizing meanings. But I said, does it feel in being there, and if you bring yourself back to the scene of just being in the room with those folks, does it feel like you're not safe, like something bad could happen. The most simple cognitive, I deliberately did it cognitive-ishly as a small enough step for him,
Right.
right? Didn't want to bring him into his body directly yet. Real ginger, right? And he said, he heard me say that and he looked like, oh yeah. And even that response showed me how out of touch he was. That was really new to recognize that this means I feel unsafe here, right? So we were starting with baby steps,
Yeah.
and I kept doing baby steps until by the end, I think it was by the end of the first session, uh, a memory of his father igniting, his huge towering father igniting over him in rage over something trivial, came back and started to make sense of, oh, that's what you suffered so much of over the slightest perceived wrong step. Yeah. Is that it? Is that what's unsafe? Having that happen again? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just revelations at the simplest
Oh,
levels of accessing. But
that's
yeah, by going in small steps, he could tolerate really remembering what he suffered and how what an ordeal it was every time. Yeah.
and I think the other feature of that, which again is not been something therapists are trained in, is you started with the present.
Yes, yes.
Right.
And that's a basic piece of coherence therapy methodology is ask the client for a good recent example of it happening.
Right.
Yeah, that's really useful.
Yes. It's so important because then if they're already, if they've got 2 feet in the present, that image of the father coming up is not as overwhelming.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. He and I had pretty good rapport going at the point where that memory came. In fact, I would guess, and it's just a guess, but I would guess that if he didn't feel good rapport with me, the memory wouldn't have shown up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I'm impressed. I mean, I'm a big baby step believer, uh, but I'm impressed that you were able to do so many baby steps within an hour session.
I, when I watch a video of my own sessions, what strikes me consistently is the kind of slow, unhurried pace of the work.
Yeah.
Like I feel Columbo-like a lot when I'm doing a session. It's like I don't hide it if I need to hold on. I need to. You just said XYZ. Let me see what makes sense to me about what we might do next. I'm very transparent about
Right.
finding my way and fumfering around. Um, but I stay on track with finding a way to make it workable for the client to bring attention to the implicit knowing,
Right.
right?
Right.
In small enough steps. And it only takes 2 or 3 of those in a session for the session to feel really powerful.
Right. I would assume depending on the particular individual.
Yeah, right, right. Well, some people are much more ready to do it, but
Right.
we're talking about the more delicate clients.
Right. And the clients whose implicit learning is, every step is a potential dangerous
Yeah,
hazard.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, but I really like that because because first of all, clients feel successful. They feel like, oh, maybe I'm not defective. I can do this.
Yes. Hey, I can do this. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Something we
yeah.
want, right? It's a sort of a disconfirming experience.
It is. It is almost certainly with these
Yeah.
kinds of clients.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm I, of course, love the concept of the disconfirming experience,
Mm.
but talk to our listeners about it because I think it's brilliant.
Oh, well, it comes straight out of memory reconsolidation research too. We bumped into it back in the 90s as we were trying to figure out why do the few clients we have that have massive transformational changes happen, what makes that happen? So we studied those few sessions for several years and finally came across the disconfirming experience and then found it in the memory reconsolidation research years later. So
Wow.
actually, I could use, I think a nice way to talk about that is continuing with that man I was describing, because uh, it's a nice example of finding a disconfirming experience once I've become really familiar with the implicit learning, maintaining the symptoms. And I pretty much have already chalked out what that was with him, uh, put into words fully. It was, yeah, I expect everybody's like that. Human beings are all ready to pounce, and they all see what a worthless, stupid thing I am. Oh, part of the background was the further remembering of experiences was that Dad would do that in front of visiting relatives and visiting friends. And I asked him, I said, did anybody ever speak up or comfort you or help? No, not at all. And I said, well, what did that mean to you? And he said, oh, well, that meant they all knew Dad was right about me. Right? Whoa, boy. So it went in
Yeah.
deep, went in really deep. And so that really powered the generalization. And so the schema, the emotional learning he's carrying all with him all the time is, in words, everybody's ready to pounce on me like Dad did, and I'll deserve it if they do.
Right.
Oh, whoa, maximum danger. So I said, once I got familiar with that, I shift. I mean, until I get really familiar with the detailed makeup of the implicit schema running the symptom, I just keep doing discovery work. I'm not even thinking of disconfirmation or change or anything. But once I get a clear enough picture of that schema, then I shift to, okay, how is this disconfirmable? What part of this? Because often there's components to it. What part of this is disconfirmable? And what I tried with him is one of our simple, we have a whole array of techniques for finding what we call contradictory knowledge, the stuff that's going to disconfirm. And I used one of the simpler ones. It's the one we call the past opposite experiences question. So simple, you know. Um, I saw a point that came. This might have been the second session, I think, where I kind of leaned forward and said, "Tell me," because look, this guy is in his 40s, right? So I know that he's actually had experiences where he made a mistake or did something wrong, and the other person didn't get upset. It was helpful. I know it. He's a 40-year-old guy. He hasn't been hiding in his closet the whole time. So that's what led me to try the past opposite experiences question for this. I said, tell me, have you ever made a mistake or done something wrong, and the other person didn't explode and pounce like that, and stayed normal or helpful? So again, he looks into the middle distance. He says, yeah, I, I, I bought the wrong book a few weeks ago and I brought it back. And I was nervous going up to the desk where this happens. And I was really nervous. And the clerk was perfectly friendly and relaxed about the whole thing and helped me and exchanged it. And it was great. I said, oh, okay. Any others? And things, once the schema is conscious and you're asking, when did it not happen? Memory brings forth things that just went by without being noticed, or were noticed and were interpreted or construed as phew, dodged a bullet,
Right.
right? Which is not disconfirmation.
Right.
If you make sense of it that
Oh,
way,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And that's how people usually interpret these things. So, but now with the schema conscious, and with me asking him this question, they kept coming. He said, "Yeah, in 12th grade, I I I I misunderstood the instructions for the term paper, and I handed in a paper that was all on the wrong topic, and I thought I was going to get like kicked out of school for it." And I went to the teacher. I was terrified, and the teacher was really kind and helpful and gave me 2 extra weeks to rewrite it, like it was no big deal. I couldn't believe it. Hmm. Okay, great. And like 3 or 4 more came up, right? Because this happens often, but it never counted this way. I was guiding him into this this mindful sort of metacognitive recognition, right? So once I had those 4 or 5 concrete instances, then I did the coup de grace, right? I used the contradictory knowledge to create this other hallmark of coherence therapy, the juxtaposition experience that does the profound unlearning of the target schema. And it's once you know to do it, it's really simple. I said to him, "Okay, look, let's review now what you know in your life about making mistakes that are visible." Now, all along, you've had it that it's a disaster, catastrophe. To make a mistake that's visible, you're going to get scorched and slammed with rage and shaming and just a searingly agonizing experience. And you're expecting that all the time around people. Can you feel that as we're reviewing it? Because I want him to experientially access this,
Right.
right?
Right.
And he says, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, good. Then I said, now, but right alongside that, and I'm deliberately framing it as right alongside. I want these things in the same field of awareness, right?
Right.
Right alongside that, I've learned from you that it's your own living experience, that not everybody's ready to pounce on you like Dad did. And I reviewed each of the specific instances he had named. I quickly ticked them off. And I just paused because there's the juxtaposition.
Right.
And and you can see I'm not trying to counteract the original learning. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm empathizing with it.
Mhm.
But then I'm also empathizing with this other knowing he has that important people often don't respond that way and stay friendly. So I paused and said, so how is it to be in touch with both of these knowings and experiences that are so different? And he said, it feels really weird. It feels like reality is standing on its head. Something like that, and these first moments of juxtaposition are a very curious experience for the client. Very different responses happen. Some clients burst out in gleeful laughter as
Right.
their mind recognizes that this hell is not real.
Right.
Joyous to the mind. They burst out in laughter, but there is a whole range of responses. I once had a client at that moment grimace, the opposite of gleeful joy, and he grimaced. I said, what's happening? And he said, well, it feels horrible to see that I've lived my whole life under an illusion. This was a man in his 50s, and it's not rare. I say it's common. I don't know, some sizable fraction, maybe 20-25% of clients go right into a grief process because of the successful unlearning of the schema, right?
Right.
It's good news, but it's terrible news
Right.
sometimes for some clients.
Yeah.
But that's an example of disconfirmation where we use, it has to be experiences that are personally unmistakably real to the client, not taking the therapist's word for it or psychoeducation, right?
Right. Yes. And this is really helpful because what you're helping me to see is that it doesn't have to be a deeply emotional experience.
Yes, yes, we get this question a lot. To me, it's amazing. It's amazing that it does not have to have the emotional valence that the original learning had at all. It simply has to be an experientially, absolutely real to the client, and it shows that the mental model in the target schema is not true.
Right. Right.
If we have time, I'll tell you the most amazing experience of that I've ever had.
Do.
Okay, I have to make it very succinct because it was a fairly complex case. This was a woman in her 40s who had complex trauma. She had complex symptomology, panic attacks, depression, and sexual aversion with her husband. Doesn't want to go there. Um, it was the 10th session, and I brought her back into eyes closed, being 18 in the conservative small town, her family in a conservative small town. And she's gotten pregnant with her boyfriend, not married, right? So this is catastrophic.
Right.
And okay, so she's back there, she's in it, she's very depressed, and I'm asking her what about this? What's the worst of it? What has you so in such depression? And she was silent for a few seconds as she found it, and she said, these are almost her exact words: "My life as a woman is ruined. I'll never marry. I'll never have children." Right? Oh, wait, this was after she had a miscarriage. There was really difficult struggle about whether to have an abortion. Her parents were against it, and she had a miscarriage, which sort of rescued her. But everybody knew that this had happened, right, in the community. So what she comes up with, and she's really in it, is my life as a woman is ruined. I'll never marry. I'll never have children. The moment I heard that, I knew what I had to do to create the disconfirmation. And all I had to do was say that again.
Mm.
She was totally absorbed in the ego state of being 18 in that situation. I knew she had a 14-year-old boy. Okay? So I just said, say that again. She says it again. My life as a woman is ruined. I'll never marry. I'll never have children. And it still feels just as true as the first time. I said, say it again. She starts to say it again. I get chills just revisiting this moment.
Yeah.
Her eyes pop open. She shouts, wait, wait. I did marry. I did have a child. She's astonished. Her head falls back on the top of the chair. And she says, this is huge. This is huge. She says, I'm feeling energy streaming through my arms and legs. I feel the space between my toes. Exactly what happened in the next seconds. And I understood her sexual aversion from this. Right? The coherence of it. Sex, she believed, and that belief
Ruined her life.
stayed there in place all these decades. She believed sex ruined her life. So how can you have fun with sex after that? Right? It's over. And the depression, that same pocket of implicit knowledge, the rest of my life is an empty, barren ruin now. The depression too, and it all shifted after that session. She came into the next session 2 weeks later and said, I tried some being sexual with my husband little bit. It's a little scary because it's been a long time, but I liked it, she said. So that she was opening that up at a pace she could handle, and the depression was lifting, and that was a major breakthrough.
Yeah.
And to me, I learned more from that session than in years of other things. I mean, it showed me how the phenomenology of implicit memory so clearly.
And how much more powerful implicit memory is
Uh,
than lived experience. So all that lived
yeah.
experience
Yeah, the mental that's
after
right.
18.
It doesn't touch it. What happens later, these emotional learnings that are a mental model or schema are somehow sealed. They create an ego state. You work so heavily directly with ego states. We do too. We don't necessarily call them that. Sometimes we do parts. Parts language is great when it fits and helps the client. We use parts language sometimes. But yeah, once that unit of implicit knowledge is formed, it's like in its own compartment. Probably there's a brain network that holds that thing, and it doesn't get touched by later life experiences that are very different. Uh, so the juxtaposition experience is the deliberate bringing of these things into the same conscious field of awareness. And the reason I shared that example was based on your comment that it doesn't require an emotionally potent experience. The thing about that session with that woman that most illuminated me about how this works is exactly that. If I had said to her before the session, "Hey, you married and you have a 14-year-old son, don't you?" She would have said, yeah, what about it?
Right.
Right. But
Yeah.
in the context of what we were accessing, it's just the facts of her life, but it's absolutely real to her. Right.
Right.
So it
Right.
had full strength potency
Connected.
as a disconfirmation in juxtaposition.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Absolutely. Otherwise, it's two parallel tracks
totally.
that just never connect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in there. It's in there about half the time. With about half our clients, we find that they're carrying living knowledge that could disconfirm about half the time. And about half the time, we have to guide some kind of experiences that create new new experiences that carry the contradictory knowledge.
Right.
It's versatility and
Right.
creativity. Yeah.
Which is more what I've done. And this is great because I think I had a misunderstanding that the disconfirming experience has to be a new experience, but
Mm,
it doesn't
no.
because these are powerful,
Ah,
lived experiences that are totally disconfirming.
yeah. And they're sitting right there in memory to be used in this liberating way. Yes.
And what I want our listeners to really get, because as you can see, both Bruce and I are passionate about this, is that um, the implicit learning is actually what we want to treat, right? Because the events are just events,
Exactly.
and they don't, the implicit memories affect decades. I mean, I'm thinking of a 72-year-old client of mine who has spent over 50 years suffering from her implicit schemas.
Yeah. These things do not fade out by themselves. Before memory reconsolidation was discovered in the very late 1990s, right around 1989, uh, prominent memory researchers published an article uh, titled The Indelibility of Subcortical Emotional Memory,
Yeah. Wow.
because extinction procedures never eliminated the target learning. Extinction doesn't do it. It's a different procedure than memory reconsolidation, a different process and mechanism in the brain. And so it looked like these things are indelible for life. I'm reminded of that by your 70-ish-year-old client. I mean, and I think therapists almost daily see that emotional learnings formed decades ago are freshly retriggering full strength.
Yeah,
They
that's
do not
right.
fade. They're not supposed to fade. As I said earlier, and I want to say it again, it's so
Yeah,
important. The emotional learning system is working properly by keeping these things going, right?
absolutely.
Yes.
Just in case we are still in a dangerous world, we
Oh, yeah.
are ready for it. We're ready to be
Yeah.
eaten by the woolly mammoth.
Yeah. You've got to have these self-protective learned responses quickly right there.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Well, this is such a pleasure. I hate to bring it to an end. Ah, thank you so,
Fully
so
mutual
yeah,
pleasure. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Janina. Yeah.
Thank you for being my guest.